Hello, everyone. This is Paula Guthrie from Creating Purpose with Paula, and I welcome you to the Spanglish World Network and Her Network on Single TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download Single TV, the app on the respective app stores, and you can find Zingo TV in Google Chromecast and Amazon Fire TV Stick, Roku Stick, and all smart TVs from 2016 and forward. Thank you all for being here today. I have a brother
Yes.
from my neuroencoding family here.
There you go.
Jonathan Steeman. He is an IT consultant, but also a neuroencoding specialist and a trauma coach, and much, much more. So I welcome you. Thank you for being here. And he's representing the Netherlands.
Yes. Netherlands in the house. So, yes.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Hola. Buenas noches. Yeah. It's great to be here. Thank you for the great introduction, Paula. And also thanks for sharing your smile with everybody anytime you go on this stage. And
yeah. So please, from your point of view, from your experience, talk to us about, let's begin this conversation about trauma. What are some of the symptoms, signs that we might need to start looking for that represent trauma?
Yeah. So the easiest way to identify that, if we go to our relationships, right? It's not always good. We go up and down. And especially when you're with your loved one, right? Then you're connected with someone, but in a very deep level, they know all of your secrets. So it's easy to really feel vulnerable. It's easier than normal, right? That's one of the best places to see where trauma and things happen and show up. But also, trauma can be caused by many different things, right? There's actually a difference between small trauma or big trauma. They all actually call it in the psychotherapy game little t and big T. There's a huge difference in that. And of course, everybody knows about the big T's, right? The PTSD, things happen from wars or things that you saw, terrible accidents or something like that. But there's also little t, and that's something that is very much underestimated. And I think that a lot of people walk around with little t's, and they might not be aware about. And I can prove it to you, actually. Because have you ever had a moment in your life where you actually responded in a way that if you like a couple of minutes like after the fact was thinking like, no, what happened? I did not have control at the moment on my behavior, right?
Yeah.
And what have you done about that? And you're thinking like, oh, what's going on, right? But this is the truth. It happens to everybody. To me as well, even as a trauma coach, doing all kinds of investments. Everybody has that. And, the thing is that when you have these kind of responses that, you can, of course, there's kind of like panic responses that you get freeze, you stop responding, you become silent, or maybe you start to fight, cause a fight, or you do something aggressive. Or even you can do something to flee away, right? Those are trauma responses. And it can be like, and everybody knows them, right?
And what can we do about it?
Yeah, and that's the magic.
You make me think, and it's like, even though now I do still, if you see someone that caused you pain in the past, or is not a smooth relationship, or recalling something that happened in the childhood, then like you said, you kind of freeze sometimes, just get quiet.
So
exactly. How can we begin to heal those traumas?
Yeah. So first of all, by recognizing it.
Okay.
and recognizing it that you are a human being and that we all have experiences, right? And I think what is important. So I learned this metaphor a while back. This is also what we use in, it also relates a little bit to neuroencoding, the conditioning tools that we use, and it will help explain that, right? So you have to be able to recognize it. But I'd like to explain this story. So there has been a research done on really huge snails. They're very giant snails, and they live in the bottom of the ocean. And they're chosen because they have very old nervous systems,
Okay.
and these nervous systems are so old, and that means that actually, if you look into the into the brain, you can actually see the connections forming really easy. So they're very big neurotransmitters, basically uh, you know very very big connections. You see all of those connections happening. Now, what happens? They did an experiment with that. They had a stick, like a wooden stick, with some, some clean metal wire on it, or copper wire on it. But it was like a stick. And what it did is these snails, they have these ears, right? You know, these little snails, they have these pointers, right? And they
Mhm.
you touch it, they go down. Well, these snails have huge ears, and they're like a almost like a crop, like huge ears. And what they did is they touched those ears, and what they see is that those ears will just go in to protect itself, right? So they did it a couple of times, and that was it. Then what they did, they put some mild electricity on the copper wires that are running around the stick, and they did it again. But this time, what happened is they touched it, and that was the response, right?
Okay.
Then they only did that one time. Now, the next time they put it against the ear again, but now they did not have energy or electricity on it. So what happened to the ear? They just gently touched it. This is the response of the ear. Look. So interesting. What happened? So basically, this is also how our nervous system works. When we experience something that is painful, it's a situation, can be anything that affects our, endangers our life, at least to our perception, that
Mhm.
is considered like dangerous or very painful for us. That is our response that we do. The response is to do this, like, and this is the fleeing effect. But it can also be attacking back. It can also be numbing yourself and that you not have any response. That's the freeze. Now, now you know this. That means that, and I liked what you said, Paula. So, because there are people that you met that hurt us in past relationship and that kind of stuff, right? So when we remind ourselves or we see someone that looks like that person, we get reminded about that. It goes into our memory and we feel exactly that painful moment, even though this is a totally different situation. That's exactly the same thing, same response that you do because it's a neuro programming. It's a programming, a collection of thought patterns that are stored in the brain because you're still here. It's a survival system, survival mechanism. So the survival response is what then happens. Now, when you talk about trauma, when it starts to become a problem, is that the load of the emotion, the pain of that moment, which happened a long time ago, is actually reproduced at this moment. Now, you might think like, why don't I have this with all my bad experiences? And that is because 99% of the time, your brain can handle it, and you go into a mourning process, and it will actually solve that. It's a natural process that happens in the brain, right? And then for the 1% times, sometimes that something happened, somehow does not get resolved. And then what happens is it sticks in the brain. And this is where also big trauma, but also small trauma comes from, because it raises your awareness to a level that is unnatural, causes stress, and then you get all kinds of cycle down, and it's not working. Now, in order to explain it, and we can then go a little bit further, is that if you think about this might be your brain, right? So this would be the brain stem. And here's the amygdala, right? This is the amygdala. And then here you have the neocortex. If you put it on each other, you'll see it something like this, right? It's like a brain, a bit like a brain. So what happens here, this is now the half of the brain. The middle of the brain, that's the amygdala. That's where our working memory is. Sorry about that. So that's where working memory is. And that's also where we experience pain. It's our emotional center. Now, there's a reason why the amygdala is just right on top of the brainstem, because the brainstem controls our movement, right? And it needs to be autonomous. You don't have time to think about it when you have to run away, right? So that's connected. Now, what is interesting is this side here is less connected. And what happens, so this is a normal state, it's connected, right? And when you experience stress, the body releases cortisol, and what happens, it goes like, well, that's a little bit overdoing it, but the cortisol actually pushes the neocortex away. So there's a little minuscule room in between, and that disconnects the big brain, the cortex, the thinking brain. That's all by design. That's the reason why you, me, everybody here, we're thriving in this world, and that we still survive. However, you can look around us. There's a lot of innovations happening, but the innovation of things around us, even though we're brilliant in building new things, we can't change our nature. We're still human beings, and we have to realize that. So, and even this is interesting. If you want to heal certain traumas, heal past stuff, and there's other things you can do, you can go into your relationship, right? I mentioned that before. You're in that, that's the most sensitive things. They know all your secrets. So you do something, and I know everybody's looking. Do something really nasty that later on you have a little bit of sorry feelings about, right? And guess what? You might be sorry about that. And of course, but you know what? That in that exact moment, it might even be that you would not be able to do anything about it. Because what happens is that you get into a state, you get memorized, you get into a certain thought pattern, and then you disconnect. So in the moment. And that's also what you can see with very traumatized people that generate like very nasty behavior sometimes. They can't handle that in the moment, and most of the people are not even aware about it. So yeah, so that's a little bit of like a foundational stuff around like what is a trauma, how does it work mechanically. So
Yeah, and I mean it's so interesting because the bottom line is that the brain is just trying to keep us alive.
exactly,
And if by
that's a
doing
search
that,
person.
if it means you have to jump every time you see a spider, you will jump because that's what it means for our brain, for your brain maybe to keep you alive. It's like see a
Yeah.
spider, you jump.
Yes, yeah,
So
exactly.
sometimes, it's we don't get to choose the trauma how we're going to respond, but it's it just happens. How
Mhm.
do you help your clients heal trauma?
There's several ways. So several ways. So first of all, it's about awareness.
Okay.
And when I do an intake with someone, and not always choose these methods to heal. I got a couple of tool belts, right? Depending on what kind of thing it is. So I have a couple of tools. Okay, so I got EMDR, so eye movement and desensitization and reprocessing. It's a long sentence almost in a short. That's why we call it EMDR. That is a technique that involves the movement of the eyes, but also bilateral stimulation that basically activates both hemispheres. So your brain gets turned on pretty much. And what is there is the theory on how this works. There's actually two theories, but let me just explain one. is that when you think about, when you really almost experience that trauma, that you really feel it, there's a technique that you build in on, then you get distracted by these bilateral stimulation. I use these earphones where you have like ticks, like left, right, and I control the speed of that. And I can also do ticks on the knee. Sounds crazy, right? But it works. So what it does, it distracts you. So one of the theories is that because it's still under investigation, but it's very successful, like for 30 years now, and that is that while you're thinking about it, remember the amygdala, which is also a working, you have the also working memory around this area as well, right? There's also some memory. So let's say that you have 8 buckets. This is all how I usually explain it. When you have 8 buckets of information, right? So that's the memory. You have a work, just like a PC. You have limited memory that you can store applications and programs on, right? So to have like an IT thing, sometimes you need a new machine because you don't have enough memory, and things starts to ask more of your machine, right? So that nature. But your memory has always been the same, and it's probably not going to change for a very long time. But that memory is fixed. So let's say that it's fixed to 8 pieces of portion of a memory. So when you start to think about the trauma, and there are specific moments, I have a process where I get really clear and really precise on where you actually, what a specific moment is where you really think about that the most, and when you really feel it the most. Then we focus on that, and while you focus on it, I load up that energy because I have, I stack that, so you're gonna feel it. It's not fun, and this is not for everybody, by the way. And there's a safe process that I do get people through, and I don't help everybody because it's not suitable for everybody. But for the people who are capable of withstanding the difficult emotions, they're perfect for this. So what happens is that you start to feel and think about that. Now back to the working memory. It's stored in these 8 pieces of memory, and you can only have 8 pieces of memory. So the whole thing, the whole memory, with everything, the feelings, pictures, and everything that plays, is stored there. Now I start to distract you. Right? I start to tick on your knees. You start to hearing sounds, and you say, "What is he doing?" I'm gonna do like this, and then and you follow my fingertips, and you follow that. And what happens is that your brain gets active, and it gets new impulses, new information that has processed. So it also needs a little bit of additional capacity of that working memory of these 8 pieces. Now, this is the interesting part. Your brain is now forced to select which parts are still relevant, right? That's the theory. And what happens then is that like half of that information is removed, and your brain is very efficient in selecting that, because that's actually the process of when you go to sleep and when you have REM sleep, REM sleep, right? It's the same exact state that we bring your brain in when we do bilateral stimulation with the eye movement and with the ticking and the sounds left and right. So that's so what happens then is that when you do that a couple of times, your grade, you give it a grade, like how's the feeling? It's now a 10, okay, or a 9 or 8. We do it a couple of times, and after like 30 minutes and maybe three rounds, that that usually is below 3, and then you can round it up and it's done. Now you can do that for a couple of weeks, then you wait for 2 weeks, and then you go and that kind of stuff. But what actually happens then is the natural reprocessing starts to happen. The same natural processes that your brain is capable of for all the 99% of the times that you got that resolved. Right. So that's one technique that I use. Yeah.
And I will share this with our beautiful audience tonight, because I had the opportunity to go to a training, and they explained that technique to me, that EMDR. So I was the facilitator, not the facilitator, but I was learning, but I had to practice on a friend. And in her bucket of vacation, we have 8 buckets, like you're saying. Her bucket of vacation, every time she thought of vacation, uh, it was bad, because she associated vacation with a violent relationship that she had with her ex-husband. So we worked that. I was able to do that, like you were saying, with the eyes, like you I don't know how to how to explain it like you did, that you distract the brain, right?
Mhm.
And at that time I followed the steps that the facilitator was sharing.
Mhm.
But what I want to share with the beautiful audience, that at the end she expressed that she felt peace. Like, it's like, wow, she's like, and even
Mhm.
after a little bit after we did that, is like, she's like, she would think of vacation, but it wasn't as terrifying as she felt it before. Like she had reprogrammed that trauma. So I was like, oh wow. So it's neat. I have not had the opportunity to do it again because my 8 buckets are full right now. I would love to learn later in the future, because of the experience that I had with her, that I was able to help her in a team. Me and her were together working it. And
Cool.
I'm like, oh wow. So like, from her experience, she said she felt peace. And I
Yeah.
haven't asked her how she feels now about vacations, but back then it was like, oh wow. But just
Interesting.
it's
Yeah.
just like that. It's just an example that we're sharing, that in her bucket of vacation, it
Mhm.
wasn't pleasant, even when she went on vacation after her divorce, because there was that trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's one technique. And it's you have to have, so if you look for someone, you have to have someone who does a thorough intake, does take care of you, and make sure that you can handle that. Because what happens is you're gonna reprocess it. That means that if something happens to you, you feel bad for at least 2 weeks, and you're thinking like, oh no, it's never gonna stop. It's like, oh no, my life. But that process is going to start again. So that in the next 2-3 days, that can be something that you have to endure. But afterwards, after a couple of sessions, and there has been proof about that. So if you compare to, for example, CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, 2 sessions of EMDR, so first session and second session, are equal to 40 sessions of cognitive behavior therapy. So that's interesting. Now, there's also another way, and that's a technique that we have been mastering, and that's the stop technique. That is basically a technique that we program that we basically, before we go into that state, we distract ourselves. And you can do a pattern interrupt, you do something crazy, so that you're like, what's going on? And what's going on, it's called transcerebral surge. And you can see it when your eyes go all the way down, right? You see something searching, and the eye movement, right? So that's what you can see when people are in that state. That's what we also learned from Joseph McClendon in the institute, right?
Yes.
In our encoding institute. Now, what is interesting about that is that's a different approach. It also works, and that's what's interesting, but it has a different approach, and that is more aligned to the snail story, right? So the snail has a program, right? So that means that if this happens, so this is like the brain, the brain thoughts pattern, right? So you have a pathway, and it goes this way because it knows, here I get the touch to the stick, and then I have to follow this, and then I close my ears because otherwise I would be hurt. Now, what you can do, because originally you only had like the first portion, the foundation, that you feel something on your ear, and then you slowly do something. That was the original one. Now, so now you have a new one, and that is existed by it's called a significant emotional event. That's where bad things or good things also happen, that has a lot of energy, a lot of emotion attached to it, and then it's stored in the brain because, well, this feels good, or, oh, better save this for later because we have to be careful, right? But now you can reprogram yourself, because it's like a pathway that you can take. And rather than, now this was the faulty thought, right? So the faulty snail thought. But now you can do and apply stop technique. So you go into that feeling, and just at the beginning of that bad feeling, when you start to think like, oh, I'm gonna get scared, so before you close up the whole ear, you say, wait, stop, I want something else. And what you do is you program a new kind of behavior to what you want. So you change the default. So if you do that long enough, and you can condition yourself by doing that in a certain way, if you want to hear about that, maybe, I don't know if we have time on that to show that, but it's a different approach. But you basically reprogram yourself, and this is what happens when you sleep. You get into the REM phase, and what happens is that there's like, the metaphor is like, what there's like, do you know when it snows, right?
Mhm.
You've been playing outside, and then and you see all these footsteps, and then you sleep for a night, and the next day there's a fresh new layer of snow, and you barely see these footsteps. But you can, if you really look at it, you can see it a little bit, because there's some less snow, but it's covered, but it's less dense. You got what I mean?
Yeah.
So in the same way, the REM sleep does that every night. So where all the brain pattern, all the thought patterns that you have been using that might not be useful anymore, eventually gets cleaned up. That's the different way. And it's really powerful, very fast, effective tool. Yeah.
So how has your life changed? Tell us about, like, how have you used it in your life? What are some of the traumas that you've been able to heal?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a really great question, because first of all, I was able to heal myself on that because I learned the stop technique, and I also experimented with something else, with EMDR, which works also, but in a different way.
Okay.
And I think what is interesting to know is that when you have a coach, and you learn the stop technique, or you find some event where Joseph McClendon is speaking, and you learn it, or you go to one of his podcasts, for example, that could also be. But you are also trained in that. You can learn that, and you can practice that in your for yourself, and you just do 2 sets a day with 10 repetitions, and then you reprogram to something what you want instead. So that's what I did as well, because in the institute we don't teach theory, so we practice it ourselves, and that's good, because we want to have the certainty that the tools that we use are effective, and also safe to use with our clients as well.
Yeah.
So
And
I
go
yeah
ahead. No, go
yeah
ahead.
so that said, when if you looked at me like maybe 5 or 10 years ago, you could very well see that I had ADHD. I was very hyperactive. I was very, and I know, yeah, I can talk. Yes, I can talk. Definitely, I can talk. But it was something jittery, like something jittery about me, like all the time. And I was constantly working, and eventually that led to a almost like, well, it was pretty much a burnout. But I think I was very early in that, where I started to think like, oh man, I need to do something differently. And I also learned about, I just don't, yeah, often don't remember his name, but it's a guy. It's a doctor, a Canadian doctor, I believe. Brilliant guy. I might come up with it
We'll come
later.
up to you.
Um, but this guy, this brilliant psychologist, and he actually has a different theory about what ADHD is. And that is about that ADHD can be very well be caused by traumatic experiences you as a kid. Now think about that. Hyperactive kids and feeling safe or not safe, because that's the result, right? So what do you think that a kid what happens with a kid when it doesn't feel safe. And it's interesting because if that is true, then that would also explain why ADHD like symptoms are also hard to see with women, because women are not as aggressive as a as a natural thing. There's a in like if you really go stereotype, you could say like maybe women are more caretaking and less aggressive, and men are less caretaking and a little bit more like a little bit more, right? And aggressive can be more assertive as even, right? So maybe that's not the right word, but in that way you can see that there's a difference. So it's easier for to say that a woman would potentially internalize that kind of stuff. Now, so that's why you don't see that, and then all when you get in a later age, then you start to recognize that and you get that diagnosis. Now, but this doctor, which I'm gonna get to the name in a second, it's on my tip of my tongue. But this doctor says, look, it's mostly is caused by childhood trauma, and it can be very simple things, someone shouting at you or something like that. But what my story was, when I was a kid, I was energetic and I wanted to move and all that kind of stuff, and I think that's normal as a kid, to be honest. But it distracted the class, and we have to have everybody, sit in the chair, make sure that you do your work and all that stuff, right? Structurizing that kind of stuff. And I didn't really fit into that. And in a subconscious level, I start to believe something, that apparently there's something wrong with me, and I have to adjust myself and compensate and adjust myself to the school and everybody around me, because there might be something wrong with me, and otherwise I will distract other people. Now think about that for a second, what that does to you as you are a kid. One of the deepest fears of a human being is the fear of rejection. And as a kid, you don't have any control about that. So what happens, I believe, in my eyes, and later on I saw this same thing, and maybe you as a person, if you listen, looking at this, you recognize a little bit of that. What happens if you adjust to the environment and you're very good in adjusting to the environment? You don't develop healthy boundaries. And if you don't develop healthy boundaries because you don't think, you believe you deserve it, because you continuously to adjust to everybody, so to just keep the harmony, and and you're not enough, that's what you believe. What happens then is you start to growing into the adulthood, and you start to get older, and then you get more responsibility, and at a certain time the bubble has to burst. So the theory is, if we could heal that trauma, if you could look into that belief system behind that, then then the fear of not being enough, and the focus, that's why where a lot of not everybody, but you can see some cognitive ability with some people with ADHD, that they're like, where's the danger, am I good, is everything okay? And sometimes they're very sensitive to surroundings around them because they're always focused externally. Now, if you look at the brain again, in the amygdala, that's always searching. That's always searching by default already, without any trauma, because it's designed to keep you safe. And that's why when you when you walk on the on street, and then I don't know, a bucket of or like a ladder falls around, and you just step aside. You're not there like, okay, I'm going to think about what I'm going to do, the left or right. No, your body responds automatically,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so
Interesting.
that yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting,
it
right?
is interesting, something to think about. In the I'm in the classroom right now, and when my kids express a negative thought about them, like, oh, I'm just stupid. It's like, nope. Like, I try to stop that. It's like, don't talk to yourself that way. And
Stop it.
now you're making me think if
Yes.
if it's part of their ADHD.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Or is ADHD a set of behaviors that, if you have these set of behaviors, that would be resolved if you look at how the diagnosis works. And I got the books here behind. Is you have like 9 behaviors, and if you match 7 and it has impact on your life, then you probably have ADHD. But nobody looks into the brain. It's just an observative thing. We see behavior, and that's what we can observe, and then we can create a diagnosis on it. But a diagnosis is not, this is what you have. This is, it's a direction of potentially that you need that this is where we start treating you. That's what it is. It's not a label. It's not something you can identify with. It's just the start point of a treatment. And I think that's what we see goes wrong into the world. I think that's one of my messages, because what I did, I turned it around. Because in a DSM-5 book, if you go to a psychiatrist, and there are cases that you need that, and there are cases where medication is really good for stabilization, of course. And there's also growth, and I believe that there's also potential that you can grow beyond. Because I hear the craziest things, right? So you get medication, and then and then all of a sudden I had these questions like, yeah, but I had medication, and all of a sudden, after a couple of years, I didn't have any problems with it anymore, so I could quit the medication. Okay, good. So you grow over it. So that means there is growth capability. And what that means is that your brain has different layers of frequencies and functions, and left and right. And when the brain starts to develop and you grow older and you get into life, your brain develops in a way that it works better together. Your brain parts and the intelligence different specialization starts to work and better together. And I believe that that's the solution. And if you think about it, you can look at it into DSM-5. You have these set of behaviors, and these set of behaviors, you can also say, look, this is a behavior, and then you look just like the behavior, and okay, what could be the possible causes of that behavior? And a very good, so why do we have an all out rise in ADHD diagnosis in the world? Why do we have that, right? I dare you to look at the trends when social media started to rise up, and also when the diagnosis starts to rise up. So let's just take one of those things, right? Let's say it's one of those things. What is the most troublesome problem with people with ADHD? I think it's focus. Now, what do you think that happens when we sit behind our phone? Everybody, right? Who has a phone, right? Who has a phone? Everybody,
Yes.
right? It's the law, like Joseph said. It's the law. Everybody has a phone. But how distracting is it? These I'm also an IT guy for many years, and that's why I'm very I understand the mechanics behind that, because I'm a technical guy. So that's why my explanation is like that. And I think that by explaining by that, people start to understand it, and they feel more empowered by it, because now they can make their own decisions, right? But the phone is designed to distract you, and these social media applications are designed to distract you. How many kids do you see at work or somewhere, or behind the phone, so that they're not the problem anymore? And sorry to say, if you hear it from me, but this is not helping your kid. You're basically helping your kid get addicted to this behavior, and it steals away their focus, guys. And I'll tell you this, the people in Silicon Valley have their own schools, and they don't have any phones, tablets, technology there. And you know why? Because the people in Silicon Valley have been designing all the software, have been designing this thing that steals away your attention so that they can earn money, but they know that they don't want to have that for their kids. So it's damaging the brain. So you could say, yes, ADHD is on all out rise. I would say, how often do we get new releases of DSM-5 books? And is it now time to get a new diagnosis or new kind of set of diagnostics? And mind you, DSM-5 is not a scientific paper. It's not a scientific book. It's a book where experts, of course, the best of the field apparently, talk with each other and decide which type of behaviors belong to a certain label. So and align that with a certain treatment. But if I bet that that whole social media stuff that's stealing your focus, which is one of the main reasons why people go into go to the doctor. Yeah, my kid cannot focus, or even teachers say that to their kids, right? Is exactly the cause of that. So I'm just taking one thing. I'm calling that unlabel yourself.
That's interesting. I mean, it is interesting because here now everybody has a phone. Even elementary kids have a phone, and
Yes.
it's a way to get the dopamine going in a bad way, in a way that
Yeah.
it's addictive. So there
Hmm.
could be a correlation between technology, the addiction of technology, and ADHD. Now,
Yeah.
how did your ADHD improve? Because you still have a phone. So
Yes.
tell us about it. How can
I do have moments where I actually abuse myself and watch
because
too
we're
much.
humans,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. But I am aware about that. And actually, I had my daughter had she was doing really bad at school, and she was basically slacking and not showing up and skipping classes and everything. And a couple of months ago, I asked, I don't know why, because but this school, when they are late for a class or they miss a whole day, you get the same email. So I was thinking like, okay, she occasionally gets a little bit too late. I also come too late sometimes, but I was thinking like, okay, but then eventually I caught up with a mentor, and she said like, okay, this is not good. She's not going well in school. Long story short, she lost her privilege on her phone, and a phone is a real privilege to have. So I took that away. She was grounded, and long story short, after I think 4 weeks, I agreed with her. You get everything back when you go to school every day for 3 weeks, and then not miss any class, and then show up every day. Right? There's always an exception, but she did that, and then I gave the phone back, and this is what it said. Look, this phone is designed, especially with the application of social media, to steal, and also the free games and that kind of stuff, to steal your attention. They're designed to steal your attention because they earn money with it. So be very careful. I'm going to give you back, but be very careful, because one of the most valuable resources of this time is your attention. And where you put your attention and intention on makes a very big deal in this world. So with that, I give it back to you. So I gave it back. And she said, well, thank you for that. And I also want to thank you because I felt much better. And if you think about depression and things that happens with the youth, if they if you only connect through a phone, that's not real connection. We are human beings, and that social media cannot replace that.
And it causes trauma, because now it's like if they get you with the funny, mouth open as you're eating, and they take a picture and then they share it on their blog or their group, and I see some of them
Yeah.
laughing, you know, but the others that might
Yeah.
not like it, so then that's also a big cause in our mental health right now for our youth.
Yes.
It's
Mm.
not feeling belonging if you're not part of the group, or if they're making fun of,
Mm.
something silly that they thought it was silly, but you don't think it's silly. So it also
Mm.
causes, trauma. But I mention it because we're talking about trauma today.
Yes, yeah, we have a little bit of a side loop, but this is where I came from. This is where my interest came in trauma, because I found that it's also part of the ADHD things that happens, and so I look at these things a little bit different, and I found that there are different approaches that help people to have lasting change, and also have like things that you work with the body, like somatic, and also like breath work, If you don't want to use the brain as the entry, you want to work with the body and work up. So that's also what you can do. But these are very, very um, powerful tools, and I just want everybody to know that you don't have to sit with these things. And I believe that there's two things that I would say that will make a difference. First of all, a relationship is a beautiful place to heal, and I believe that we in our relationship we have the opportunity to give that gift to each other, and that requires to understand what a trauma response is. And I think that's what I'm trying to make clear in this session, right? So how can you recognize that? And if you recognize that trauma, you can also recognize it from yourself and from others. And what you can do if you're in a relationship, if you really love each other and you want to go forward with this, you can give each other room at the moments that you're experiencing a trauma response, because it does not help when you cave in on each other, because you're basically trauma responding on each other. And everybody's been there, and even I. So it happens sometimes, and then you have to agree with each other, like, okay, the first person who sees that pattern uh, asks, so let's just give some room. Let's give some room to each other, and then we go back. That's one thing. And I think I forgot the second thing.
Well, let me
The thing
say
is that,
that it is
yeah,
important whenever you learn to recognize your own traumas and you choose to heal them, then it gives you an
mm,
opportunity to see the other person. That might be a trauma
yes,
response. That might be a defense mechanism response. And then
yeah,
you give them a break. Then you don't react towards
yeah,
that, because then you
exactly,
recognize that,
yeah,
in my case, he could be having a self mechanism response. And I'm like, okay, just let you
yeah.
be for a little bit, and then we'll move on. But where can we find you? This is so fascinating. We can stay here talking, forever. But where can we find you? I know we usually have about 3 million viewers. And where can they
Yeah,
find you if they
awesome.
want to know more about you?
Yeah. So can look me up, Jonathan Steeman on Instagram. That would be the best place to look me up. Then I would not be, spamming you with new updates from Microsoft and that kind of stuff. No, I'm on my Instagram is the best place to connect, or Facebook, and it's just Jonathan
Yes,
Steeman.
and we need
Uh,
to have you back so that you can teach us your beautiful ways of neuroencoding and how you are beautifully,
yeah,
beautifully moving up to next levels each month. Seems like to me like you're really learning, applying it in, like you're being an example for others out
thank you
there.
so
So
much.
I so appreciate you. I honor you and I celebrate you.
Yes, thank
So,
you, Paulo. That means a whole lot to me, hearing you say that. And what I just want to give, I'm not special. And that's also what our mentor Joseph says. He's not special. He just has a process to do these things. And I'm happy, very happy to come back and explain. For example, we can do the stop technique. We'll figure out how we can best demonstrate that. But that we'll figure it out.
yes, that would be great. Any last message that you would love to leave our beautiful audience with?
Yeah, just heal your trauma and enjoy life as as you deserve to live it.
Yes, yes, heal your traumas. How beautiful is that? Because when we heal our traumas, then we get to enjoy life even more.
Mm. Even more, right?
Even
Yeah,
more.
exactly.
Yes, and we give others space sometimes when we learn to heal our traumas, and we give others the space to heal their trauma, to recognize that that
Yeah,
could be a
yeah,
response from a
exactly.
trauma. So that is
Yeah,
beautiful. Yes. Heal our traumas. Thank you so
yes.
much for being here tonight. If
Thank you for having me.
Yes, anytime. If you all love this content, if you think someone would benefit from it, go to my YouTube, Paola Guthrie, and share this interview with someone you love that you think it will benefit them. So this show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all news and programming. Spanglish World, Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Blessings, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.